Okay. All right. So here we go. So good morning. So I have a few
Morning.
questions, and also, by the way, what I'll do is for each question, I'll cut to the different people, so they'll all answer the same question. You know what I mean? So it's easier for people to compare
Yep.
like that. Okay.
Yep.
So I'll just go through them. So first of all, can you talk a little bit about, or can you identify the curriculum that you're most familiar with, that you've been engaged with?
Yeah. Yeah. So I had a full training in EL, like a week-long train the trainer so that I could train with EL. And I've seen it in practice. The third through eighth graders at my site are using EL. Um, and I'm very familiar with making meaning and being a reader, being a writer, the whole collaborative classroom suite.
Mhm.
I am somewhat familiar with the others, like just have done an analysis of some of the other pieces. So I've like looked into journeys a little bit, wit and wisdom. I'm not as familiar with National Geographic, although that your email piqued my interest to learn more about National Geographic,
All right.
and want to learn more about bookworms
Well,
because I've
I
heard really
will.
good
Okay, that's fine. I will stick mainly to the collaborative, the suite. What is it? CSC suite, the making
things. Yeah,
meaning and making. We'll talk about that. It seems to be more of your bailiwick, but then also maybe a little bit about EL if we have time, since you did the training for that. First of all, what are the strengths of the CSC suite?
Um, for the collaborative classroom, all of the curriculum is super plug and play for the most part. It does require basic training or understanding about how the different pieces work. But after that, especially with making meaning and being a writer, it has everything you need to know in one, maybe two manuals. It has all the books that you would possibly need. And so the planning time and the load on the teacher is low, and teachers can just like take it and run with it and ensure that kids have like basic comprehension and writing skills, not only like how to compose for being a writer, like the conventions, but also some more of the creative pieces like poetry or like some of the opinion writing and how to like add on and elaborate. So they know that none of the standards go missing when they're teaching with the curriculums, and they know that they're not going to have to invest a whole lot into planning. Like for a week, there's a look ahead section in which you spend about 20 minutes at the beginning of the week looking ahead. And then daily, about 5 minutes, like gathering your materials and then like reading through the curriculum. You're supposed to also like make sure that you read the books and mark them with post-its for the comprehension questions or where vocabulary instruction is going to happen. But it's a low lift in terms of planning and implementation.
Is that the same for middle school as it is as for elementary school?
I'm only familiar with it in elementary school, so
Okay.
I'm not sure about middle school.
Okay. Okay.
But yeah, I appreciate another strength is I really appreciate the explicit vocabulary instruction. Every week there's 4 tier 2 words. Students have opportunities to apply to other contexts, so they really internalize it. They're able to use the word orally. They have like role plays and games, and they really, really start to love these words, and they come alive for them. And so I think that that's a big strength, because we know that vocabulary is so important, and a word is a hook to hang an idea on. And so the kids are using the words not only when they're reading the text, but like through oral language and in their writing.
And what would you say on the flip side are aspects that teachers or kids don't necessarily care for?
Every teacher or kid that I've worked with them has appreciated and liked it. Like maybe it was because it was moving from like Hawkins to something like this. That was a lot. They saw like growth right away, meaning, and being a writer is that it's not content driven.
Mm.
And so that's actually a very big thing that I've been hesitant around myself. I think for new teachers, it's great to like get it rolling, but I wish that it was like deep thematic content units with the same kind of structure of curriculum. But I'm lacking the like, let's do a deep dive into being a change maker or space or pollinators or like something where kids can really build that content knowledge while learning these other pieces. So I think
So,
that's again.
so it's a challenge that it's not that you're saying, like, you wish it had that content knowledge in terms of just building knowledge, or in terms of having like a social justice mindset? What are you referring to?
I'm referring to both. Like, there's not a lot of knowledge building. It like takes a concept and then not necessarily like content concepts, but it just like jumps around. Like, it's like, okay, we're gonna look at nonfiction text and learn all about the pieces of nonfiction text, but it doesn't go like deep into one idea.
Yeah.
And in Oakland, our context, like, I won't really want students to go deep into like social justice standards and environmental advocacy standards. So these standards exist and they are missing within these curricula. So I think there's an opportunity for to use the same structure as the CCC Learning Hub has, but go deep into curriculum and social justice standards.
I just want to make sure I'm clear on the planning requirement.
There's Yeah, it doesn't take much time at all. For a week, you would do a look ahead that takes about 15 to 20 minutes so that you understand like the week ahead and some main objectives and like pulling the text that you need. Because for making meaning, there's one text that you go deep with, and then pulling your vocabulary cards, etc. And then day, 5 to 10 minutes
Day-to-day
to prep
planning.
and organize.
Wow. Okay. And what about English language learners?
Great.
Yeah, that's definitely definitely a plus.
Yeah. In the sidelines, there's like teacher tips, and
Uh-huh.
one of the main teacher tips is around ELLs.
Mm-hmm.
So like a lot of these are like suggestions because they don't know which teacher or which context are picking up these manuals, but there's a deep dive for English language learners. Like, you might want to pre-teach these vocabulary words or try this visual or ask this question. So there are strategies and tips embedded. There's also like small group support suggestions for ELLs in the sidelines.
I'm wondering.
I will say that SIPS is a part of the collaborative classroom also. It's part of the suite, and it was originally suggested for like tier 2 and tier 3. So if being a reader doesn't work for your students because maybe there's not enough practice, it's like a tier 1 instruction, then they recommend doing SIPs for tier 2 and tier 3. But recently, especially in distance learning, they've recommended doing SIPs instead because it's accelerative. So at the site that I'm working right now, we've put being a reader on the side and are just using SIPs for our tier 1 reading instruction, and our kids are growing so much more than they were before, like even in an in-person environment, because they're getting 4 days a week of systematic instruction, and kids are going from like right now we had second graders who are at kindergarten level who just in this first part of the year went through all the mastered all kindergarten skills and are mostly through first grade skills and are about to get back on grade level. And it's just from August to December through distance learning using SIPs. So I think the CCC with SIPs has the best quality that I've seen of like the foundational skills and teaching kids actually how to read.
I'm wondering also, just like it has the ELL stuff, English language learners stuff on the side, like you might also want to consider this, pre-teaches vocabulary. Yeah. I wonder about kids with, in thinking, does it work for kids with learning differences, whether they be dyslexic or what have you? Does it also have stuff on the side there, or is it just that's part of the regular core content?
I think it's part of the regular core content in that, like, they really do a good job of separating the two sides of like the simple view of reading, in which there's like one modality of like how you teach kids to read. And, like Nancy Young's ladder, that side of things with the structured literacy and the systematic approach is done through like SIPs and being a reader that has a ton of support for dyslexic students or students with learning disabilities because or differences, because it's like all paced. And the quote from Anita Archer that I appreciate is like, go as fast as you can, but as slow as you must. And it's so differentiated so that each kid masters. It's not about exposure for that side of the framework. It's about mastery, right? So like with those pieces of the foundational skills curriculum, all kids grow and move at their own pace in differentiated small groups. For the other side, like comprehension, vocabulary, content knowledge, there's not a whole lot that you need to do so different. Conversation and teachers give access and scaffolds to all kids because of by the way that they explain or their visuals or like strategic grouping or partnerships, but the kids don't have to lift the words off the page themselves for that part of the day. So I know like a lot of dyslexic students are like so brilliant, they just get frustrated when they have to do the piece for lifting the words off the page, but have a dialogue with them and they can access the content, you know, like give them the words to use and the structure in which to navigate the ideas, and they can do it. So I think what's difficult about curriculum in general is that size fits all way. But one side, like this structured literacy foundational, it's all structured literacy, but the foundational skills like needs to be differentiated and meet each kid where they're at and take them on the trajectory that works for them. And then the other side, like the ideas, the thinking, like you could do that in a totally different way. And too many times people try to do it together, and it's ideal if some of the concepts cross over, but it doesn't need to happen that way. This part can happen 20 to 30 minutes a day.
Right.
This part, all this rich, like juicy part of teaching is the rest of your day, and doesn't have to be as like individually path guided. And especially like they get to a grade level and need to figure it all out, this at least is the foundation to work from.
What about professional development? Do you all do that internally? Is there, like, how much professional development is needed, especially in an ongoing way with this, to be able to engage with a coach or a peer teacher or whomever? Like, what's the optimal situation for this?
Yeah, so with being a writer and making meaning, we've seen success just with like an initial PD that just helps people navigate the manual. So they have to like open the box, look through the text, understand what planning is like, and then just like maybe a pulse here and there for like, how's it going? Okay, let's do a look. Ideally, you would get together in PLC with teachers at your grade level and do like a unit look ahead where you're like, okay, what's coming up? What didn't work from the last unit that we want to integrate? But it can be just like very teacher led. And there's questions and guides within CCC that's like suggestions for those PLCs and suggestions on like a process for unit planning. So you could pull this like list of questions or like look at the look ahead and then look at your checks for understanding. It like guides you through the process. And there's also videos and modules on the Learning Hub that are like mini PD series, go at your own pace. And yeah, I've seen teachers find a lot of success. I think always coaching makes things better if you have a good coach and somebody who can be a mirror and ask you the right questions and like support you in navigating parts of the manual maybe that you didn't know that existed, but it's pretty simple.
How are kids responding to this, if you don't mind me asking? How are kids responding to this, especially kids who are behind? What are you seeing from an academic standpoint?
I have seen for making meaning and being a writer that kids really like it. They know what to expect. There's like routines and structure within that they internalize, like partner conversations, or like they know that on this day and this day they're going to learn new vocabulary words, and they know the process for learning the new vocabulary words. So I have found that a lot of times kids really thrive off of that kind of consistency. And so that they can focus on the learning, you know, they know what to expect in terms of the structure of the day. They're just like, okay, new word here, and they can learn the word. And teachers really make the vocabulary come alive. Like I remember a couple years ago, there was a kid that was in the hospital, and the teacher went to visit. The kid got super excited that he knew some of these vocabulary words, like was like interact like, oh, like that's a making meaning word, because the teachers kind of make it come alive and they're like bigger words than they're used to. So that was a first grader, but I've seen kids really enjoy it, like authentically. The stories are interesting.
Let me
Yeah.
let me shift a little bit. What would you say then would be the conditions for success? So you would say this would work in what type of environment?
I'm not sure what environment it wouldn't work in, because I've seen it work in dual language context. I've seen it work in like Deep East Oakland. I've seen it work in West Oakland. I've seen it work like those are the contexts that I'm familiar with. And so a lot of times curriculum isn't adopted well or rolled out well in Oakland historically. And people like picked it up and rolled with it. Like you could walk into a space and you know that it's being taught and it's being taught well and the environment feels good.
Mm-hmm.
So I think in the like I haven't seen it in other contexts outside of Oakland, but I've seen it be successful. I fully answered your questions, but yeah, I am feeling a lack with the content knowledge, but in the plug and play, good teaching is happening way, I appreciate it. I think what you were before in terms of like the teaching kids to read,
Mm-hmm.
I think SIPS is better than being a reader in that way, to go back to that.
Mm-hmm.
But you've heard me say that before.
No,
But
that's
yeah,
okay.
I think that works for all kids.
So it might be something that if adopted, you would have to switch out SIPs with the foundational skills piece being a reader if you were doing that for tier 1, as opposed to having SIPs as tier 2 and being a reader as tier 1.
You don't necessarily have to. Being a reader is pretty strong. I
Mhm.
would just make sure that you're adopting both if you were to pick it up, because that will guarantee that all kids learn to read.
Adopt
And
both, meaning
in
have SIPs be tier 2 to catch anybody that doesn't.
yeah, if you're doing the whole suite, I would do that. But in Oakland, the RTI triangle is inverted. And
Mhm.
so a majority of kids need some more systematic instruction than initially thought.
Okay. So I have just 2 more questions for you. Thank you so much
Yeah.
for your patience. I appreciate
Yeah.
it. So, um, actually 3.
Yeah.
So let me give you an opportunity to speak directly to the selection committee. You know, they're thinking about what to pick and they've got a list of things to pick. What would you tell them? What do you think they should know about the curriculum that you're familiar with, both, you know, the collaborative classroom suite that you work most closely with, and also if you're familiar with other curriculum? What would you say to them? What would you have them to know?
I would say it's really important to focus on the data, and that we want to make sure that we are adopting something that really works and that will really work for our population. And so I think like a really intensive rubric is necessary, and an agreed upon rubric before diving into these different pieces. I would also tell the Oakland Selection Committee to be really mindful about what works for early readers or beginning readers, and then how different that might be. I'm sure that the foundational skills instruction is really strong. They might want to consider something that is supplemental for foundational skills. And I know that that's something that like there's a lot of resistance around, but we need to do what works for our kids. We need to make sure that there is curriculum that will ensure that they get access to their civil right to read. And so that might mean something supplemental in the K2 world, and then as an intervention beyond that. For the collaborative, the CCC Learning Hub or the Learning Suite, I would say it's really, really easy for teachers to use, and it's high quality materials, and that it's lacking in the content knowledge. And I think that our kids in Oakland really deserve deep content knowledge. I would want to make sure that they're really focused on teacher usability, however, as like a primary factor, because turnover is high and it takes a long time for a teacher to internalize a new curriculum, and we want that internalization and the application to instruction to happen as quickly as possible, because our kids deserve that. Our kids deserve high quality education. They don't deserve like year after year of teachers trying to grapple with a new curriculum. And our teachers are stressed out, they're underpaid, and they deserve the best tools they possibly can have access to address the learning needs of their population. Let's see, what else would I say? I think I would say that this is a really important decision, so don't make it hastily, especially if this is going to be like a decade. And it's very important that the Oakland Selection Committee deeply understands the history of curriculum adoption in Oakland, and understands the failed attempts in the past, and with curriculum that could have been really good for kids, what went wrong in the adoption process. And I think they need to really think about strategic rollout of whatever curriculum they select. I don't know if that is the role of the selection committee, but I think once they select a curriculum, they need to be really mindful about how it's rolled out and the support that teachers will get in the process, and that principals will get in the process.
Right. You know, you mentioned teacher turnover, but principal turnover is something else that's a challenge. And so that's one of the reasons why I asked how much support is necessary, because if you're a school and your principal is turning over regularly, or they don't have the instructional expertise, or they're just unfamiliar with the program, is that too big of a block to overcome, or can quality implementation still happen?
The principal needs to be on board. They hold the conditions for the work, but it's possible to do with new principals. I've seen it happen in our work. We've been able to support the coaches, to support the teachers in getting it done, but it does require a system of support, and having like network superintendents and a superintendent and the literacy department, like everybody has to be on the same page and like really be able to articulate the vision, so that if there's a new principal, there should be like an onboarding process. Like, here's our vision. Here's the curriculum and tools that we're using to get to the vision. Here are some benchmarks for your site. Here's the historical context of your site. And here are your like main priorities. There needs to be some oversight there, because a lot of times a new principal comes in, we all have like our own ideas, our own agenda, like wanting to refresh or turn around or whatever it is. And there needs to be some sort of like co-visioning and transition protocol, I guess.
What's the ceiling here? How high do you, I mean, based on what you've seen in the data thus far, the trajectory the kids are on in your schools, what's the high end here? How high can student achievement go with something like this? I know this is more qualitative, this is your perception, but if the conditions are right, using this, like how high can we get in some of these struggling schools?
If the conditions are right, and the curriculum is implemented well, 95% of our students should be able to learn to read, lift the words off the page, and comprehend what the words that they're reading mean. And it is an injustice that we are getting results anything less to our kids. And
do you think this curriculum could help, actually, if implemented well, fairly, all that type of stuff, could actually be used as a tool to get to that?
Yes, I think SIPs and being a reader in conjunction, or just SIPs, could do that. And I've seen it happen at my site, like already in the 4 or 5 months in distance learning. I've seen kids who didn't know how to blend now are reading long vowels, and that's August to December. So I know it's possible, and I believe in it. I know that it can happen with strong foundational skills instruction.
All right, thank you. Much appreciated for your time. I like I said, I'm gonna edit this and cut it and do all that so that it reads like one person's after another for one question, and then the same thing for another question, so people can kind of hear it in a row like that. But I think this will be very, very, matter of fact, let me stop this recording.